and groups. Another experiment that I'd like to talk about that falls suit with this and how people can fall into conforming to roles and statuses is the Stanford prison experiment. And like I said, if we have some time, I think maybe next week we can start the movie. I like to show that. I think it's a good example of how people conform to certain roles. So Zimbardo, real quick, here's the gist of what's going on here. I don't think I'll get through all of it today. I kind of just want to present to you what's going on. Back to it. Okay. So Zimbardo, he was at Stanford University, and this was right around the 1970s. So shortly towards the end of the Vietnam War, and he kind of wanted to see exactly how these roles and statuses, after seeing Milgram's experiment, how people will conform to certain roles, and especially when it comes to prison guards and prisoners, of how people of certain authority, what they could maybe perform to certain people in these cases, in these environments. So he tries to replicate really a prison in the basement of Stanford University. And he really goes through the testing, and he tries to pick out people by advertising the newspaper to college kids. Okay, so college level individuals, and he advertises in the paper. And at that time, he offered like $15 a day, which, if you guys want to do the math, it's pretty good, especially back in the 1970s. So some of these college kids were like, "Yeah, we join in this, make some money out of it. This would be awesome." And he interviewed some of these individuals before he performed the experiment, and before he gathered exactly what groups they would belong in, either the prisoners or the prison guards. So he just asked them questions, seeing if they would like to, going along with the experiment. They're like, "Yeah, I'd like to be a part of it," whatever have you. So then he placed these individuals in groups. So the ones that were actual prisoners, he actually went to their houses with a cop car, and the cop car came into their home, and with the lights on, the sirens on, and they actually escorted the kids out into the car, into the cop car. So for most of them at the start of this, they're like, "Oh yeah, they're really getting into this study. They're really getting into this experiment. This is pretty wild." And obviously some of the neighbors were like looking at some of the kids like, "Oh, what's going on here? What did you do?" He's like, "Oh, it's just a study. It's just an experiment. No worries," as they're leaving in the car. But towards the end of the experiment, a lot of these individuals would actually conform to their roles and actually forget about their names. Like, they're actually considered just by their numbers on their shirts. And it just goes to show what kind of study the simulation, explained, and how these people actually conform to their roles to a point where they even forget about their name, forget about that they're even in an experiment. And as they're coming to, like, let's say this prison, obviously at first some of the people were part of the prison guards. They didn't really know how to show their authoritative approach. So they're guided by a person that actually was in jail, and prison guards that actually were, obviously of that status. And they're just interviewed by them, told them what they should do. Okay, obviously what type of measurements they should follow when in the prison. But some of these kids took it to the extreme. And I'll kind of explain that through the presentation. And I think the movie does a really good job of explaining the study as well. But these individuals go to the extreme, like I said, just closing people off indoors, making them do and perform really wild antics and tasks that just are pretty crazy. And to the point where the prisoner, the actual prisoner that was helping, develop this study, it's like, yeah, this is not something that actually goes down in prisons. Like, sometimes, yeah, this might be abuse of power by some prison guards, but this is really getting to a point where we might have to stop the study. So the design of the study actually was supposed to last for 2 weeks, but it only lasted about 6 days. That was it. But anyway, here's some questions that kind of, really start the experiment. So what happens when you put good people in evil place? Well, for the most part, some of these individuals will conform to that status, to that role. And they don't really know their limitations. They just continue on with these actions to a point where they have to be told by an authoritative figure to really tell them to stop. So does humanity win over evil, or does evil triumph? These are some of the questions posed in Dramatic Simulation: Prison Life, conducted in 1971 at Stanford University. And still to this day, obviously I'm teaching about it now, I'm talking about it, but Zimbardo, the famous psychologist, social psychologist that came up with this simulation, he goes around and talks about this experiment and how this was really unethical, and that it should never really be repeated. But at the same time, they got a lot of information from the simulation. And if you take me in psychology, we'll talk about independent variables and how that is used to try to alter or change your study or see your measurement, okay, and try to find out how your experiment's going to continue through the scientific method. And he didn't even have an independent variable. It was to the point where his experiment really was falsifiable, that he wasn't even following the measures that are laid out with APA formatting and you name it. So it was actually a simulation that didn't even have an independent variable, but it goes to show how real life it was. And some of the results that were found really were shocking and astonishing. So experiment design. So Zimbardo, like I said, he was running the experiment, and he was running it actually within Stanford University in a dormitory in the basement. And he actually kind of shut off some of the hallway and made some of the rooms into the cells of these places. He gathered some materials where he would dress these prisoners in outfits that resembled what a prisoner would actually wear. So it didn't have their name on it; it actually just had a number. And he gave them beanies to put over the head, so almost like dehumanizing them, right? Making and stripping them of their identity. And that was like the first goal for him. It's like, how can we try to simulate this to make sure that the prisoner actually seems like he's not even a human, that he's not even a person anymore? Well, the best thing is a lot of times when you watch videos or movies of military camps or when people go to prison, they shave their heads right away, right? They give them a number. They don't even associate them with their name. Obviously, private, right? They shave their heads and they call them by a number. And that was the first goal for Zimbardo, to try to strip these people of their identity. And once they do that, well, they consider themselves just as a number, and they'll conform to more of these actions and more of these demands than actually challenge them. So if you don't have an identity anymore, chances are you're going to conform to whatever is stated, whatever is expressed. That's exactly what happened. And I already kind of went through this already. Again, just running a simulation of a prison where these prison guards are dressed up like prison guards, act like prison guards. They're told not to strike any of the prisoners. Do you think that upheld? Do you think they actually didn't strike anybody? Now, for the most part, a lot of people were shoved. A lot of people were caused. A lot of this experiment caused a lot of fights and violence, verbal abuse especially. And even after study, there's a lot of psychological damages to many of the prisoners and prison guards. Oh, I can't believe for a prison guard, it's like, oh, I can't believe they actually pushed these people to the extent of losing their mind, right? Forcing them to do these actions that they shouldn't have done. And for the prisoners, wow, I can't believe I actually adhered to a lot of these demands and these statuses, these roles, and perform some of these tasks that really shouldn't be done. So the design, guards made the rules, plain and simple. Prisoners were unexpectedly picked from their homes and handcuffed and searched. So, like I said, really simulating, this role of being a prisoner. Even picking them up at their homes. Like I said at the start of this, they're kind of joking around about it. It's all just experiment. But towards the end, after 6 days, not even, for some of them, it just took a couple hours. They conformed to, they actually thought they're in a prison. So again, it's supposed to last 2 weeks. And even Zimbardo himself, the experimenter, the person running the study, he was the superintendent of the prison. He was the person running the prison. And he actually fell into his own experiment to a point where he's looking at it as, oh, this is my prison. I'm the superintendent of it. I want to make sure that it's running up to code and that our guards are keeping our prisoners in line. It took his girlfriend to figure it out and try to bring him back to reality. Okay, this is just a study. These are kids. This is not actual experiment, or this is not actual prison. It's an experiment. So again, prison guards, they're labeled in their outfits. They're given these objects to show and label them as this line of authority. So experiment results, real quick. I'll finish up after this one here because I want to kind of talk a little bit more about it tomorrow. Experiment was stopped after only 6 days, like I said, because many of the people were conforming to their roles. Each group could not no longer distinguish their roles in real life. Even Zimbardo, like I said, he thought he was actually running this prison. He actually fell into the role of being a prison superintendent. These prisoners, again, they thought they were actually considered by their names or by their numbers. They lost their identity, they lost their names, and they adhered to every demand that the prison guards gave them. And the way the prison guards did this was by taking away some of their freedoms. So, like their beds, took them away if they weren't listening to their demands. Cursed at them and belittled them to a point where, like I said, they lost their roles. They lost their minds in a way. So only a few days, guards became sadistic, and prisoners became depressed and showed signs of extreme stress. And they're always trying to escape, trying to leave the experiment, but they just could not. They actually thought they were in prison. And this experiment, like I said, is simulation, but just goes to show what people will actually do when giving the role of authoritative figure and a role of, let's say, a prisoner, where they adhere to the demands, and how far it actually will go. And some of the antics involved with this experiment, which we'll watch the movie when we come back from a short little break here. It's pretty hard to watch. It's uncomfortable in many situations. All right. So, is there any questions so far? So, anyway, I just wanted to present the experiment to you now and explain a little bit what it's about and how long this was supposed to last and kind of the roles and statuses of these individuals and how the simulation really was something that maybe shouldn't be repeated. And some of the psychological damages to these individuals moving forward is going to be, well, obviously pretty hard for them to realize. All right, so that's all I have for today. Again, I just wanted to present the study to you and kind of see exactly, obviously, what we're going to get into more tomorrow with the results of this study and how this is unethical and how it shouldn't be repeated. And reminder, Webb's group status, Webb's, that's going to be due tomorrow, or sorry, on Wednesday, the presentations of it. I know I got pushed back a long time, but Wednesday we'll have the group status and rules presentations. So I'll make sure you guys have that done, ready to present for it.